Hi, and thanks for joining us for another week of Inspiring Honesty. I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. This week, I'll be joined once again by my fantastic co host, Bob Greaves, and we are going to continue the discussion that we had last week, talking about crime, punishment, retribution, reconciliation, whatever you want to view it as, and what makes a crime into a crime, or why we would determine something to be that, and sort of I see where that leads us. What's great about these conversations that I get the opportunity to have with Bob is we don't script them ahead of time. We try not even to address them too much outside of the context of the show, so you can watch how it really organically grows, and we can not have a script that we need to stick to. So if a viewer wants to write in a question, we can change the direction. We can delve deeper into what you wanted to talk about. So it's exciting to continue. We did discuss a little bit this week about the direction and the things that we wanted to discuss more with the show, and the way that we wanted to continue. And I think that when we first started Inspiring Honesty, I know at least I did not know much about Bob yet. I was expecting it to be a little bit more adversarial, to be honest. It was something they're like, ooh, a theist versus an atheist, and contrasting viewpoints. And I've realized over the time how much Bob and I really can see things from very different perspectives, but can end up coming to very similar conclusions on much of the world. And I think that that speaks a lot about how, as much as, yes, I am a very, very strict atheist, I am very strong in that belief that there is nothing out there, as much as that, or nothing out there supernatural, that is not like to change for me. But sorry, my computer froze up on me. But Bob is as much the opposite, in the very firm position that he believes that there's a God, and there's not, as he said, not really anything that can change his mind. So the two of us are polar opposites in that respect, but we see the world in ways that converge, in so many ways, that I love to bring that to the table, and to show that atheists and theists are not worlds apart. We're not completely different people, and there's not an irreconcilable wall between us. So I think that show, or that this show, has grown a lot in that respect. That Bob and I bring the conversations to the table that are more in tune with what we care about and what we're passionate about than what we disagree about, and that it can really bring a greater depth of understanding to each of us on that note. So with what we've been talking about lately, it's delving a little bit more into politics, in a way, but realistically, it's delving into the human condition, and the lives that we all live. And me, as an atheist, I certainly see that as the only life we get to live, and as some of the most fundamentally important questions that we can ask. So it's with the, I don't know how to say this. It's with incredible amounts of excitement and fervor that I invite Bob onto the show to tell me all the ways that you think that I'm correct. Bob, how you doing today?
I, I'm doing good. And I got to confess that when we first started this show, I really wanted to be true to my kind and dislike you in the most powerful way, but I found that impossible to do. Actually, I'm kidding. Um, I think that it is true that we actually do share a lot of values alike. And the truth is, I think that most people do share these values. There are definitely exceptions, but I mean the values that we hold on to are honesty. We want to hold on to an honest dialogue. We expect reason to play a significant role in the way that we think. It's true we come to just 180-degree different conclusions as to the question of God, but I think that there's some ways in which neither of us are typical. You're not a typical atheist. I'm not a typical theist, and I really hope that if there's anything we can do is encourage people to. I'm not interested in encouraging people to be atypical just because that's a ton of fun and it throws everybody off, but because too often typical means that we're not really following reason. We're just following a crowd. And not that the crowd is always wrong, but we really do need to take responsibility in thinking for ourselves. And I think that you're certainly a person who's sought to do that, even in the way you construct your argument against God, the idea or the notion of God, and all that. And so I think there's been a lot to like, and that we found in each other. And I am hoping that one of the things that this show does for others is make them recognize that there is absolutely nothing to be lost in terms of being involved in honest discussion. I don't think that at any point in time you've been worried that your atheistic ideas are in any risk because you're doing this show, and I've never at any time felt as though my theist beliefs are. You cut out on me. I couldn't quite hear what you said.
I said that's just because I know that you're wrong.
Oh, yeah.
So
well, yeah.
I'm not worried. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold this week, so I apologize for the coughing and any sniffling I might do. Doing my best. But I did want to say that this it leads, and before we get into the topic of the week, I guess it leads a little bit into a conversation that Bob and I had in a group that we're part of on Facebook. It's actually created by Alan Darley, the host of Good Reasons to Believe, that airs, I believe it's 10 a.m. our time now on the place. And it was a good friend of mine had posted the spectrum. It works. It's similar to any two-dimensional graph, showing 4 quadrants with your atheist and theist, and your agnostic and Gnostic. Actually, I think it was reversed. The agnostic Gnostic was on the up and down scale. But what we noted in that is, I think that a lot of the reason that you and I agree, or that Bob and I agree, I forget who I'm addressing with these soliloquies here, is that the fact that we're both so strongly agnostic leads to a lot of similar conclusions, regardless of our theistic beliefs, that or a lot of similar ways of seeing the world. So I almost, in many ways, think that that's a far more important distinction with how people view the world. When I look at Alan Darley, again, the first guest that we had on this show, and now we're happy to have him on the network, but he is very strongly a Gnostic theist, and he and I are very diametrically opposed in much of what we believe about the world. So that makes a very significant difference. But it's certainly worth noting that there's more than just what people believe in, but how they come to these conclusions as well.
Now, I think you're onto a theme here that I would recommend to be very important, and that is this: that not that I think that everybody has to be agnostic, and let me define the term. Agnostic does not mean, when I say I'm agnostic, I don't mean I don't know anything. Is there a God? Oh, I don't know. That's not what it means. It means, as I use the term, this means that definite conclusions. I have very genuine beliefs. I have a faith that is, for me, very personal and very real. I just know that I don't have any certainty with which I can compel this upon anyone else. And I realize that I'm making this lost in a universe where I lack the kind of proof that a scientist would really want to be able to say, this settles the question. But I do think that there's something about agnosticism, even if and it's always a matter of degree. It's not as if I don't believe nothing can ever be known. There are things that can be known that constrain certain possibilities. Even if I can't still narrow down those possibilities, they can still be constrained. But I think that when people can recognize that there's a level of uncertainty that we can't, how do we know things that aren't so? When we're open to that, we are capable of actually being involved in meaningful and workable cooperative dialogue with others with whom we disagree. And I think that the far more Gnostic now Alan is an intelligent fellow, and I really do appreciate his demeanor. He is very respectful, and he's honestly interested in having the dialogue, which is part of the reason why he was invited to do this show, because he's just I think in many ways a very excellent example of a person who wants to argue from his standpoint, but with great care and respect. But I think that the more dogmatic a person is usually the more they tend to be someone who is not only certain, but is so certain that they just think that anyone who doesn't think like they do is an idiot, And so I think it makes it difficult to have conversations with people who don't agree. Now, in some ways, I think I'm evangelizing the benefits of an agnostic approach. But also to say that just because one recognizes that I can't nail everything down with certainty, it doesn't mean that I can't risk a conclusion that makes sense to me, particularly if it's one where I've got to make a decision, or where I prefer to make a decision because it strikes me as appropriately timely.
I I think that's a really good point, especially on the dogmatic side and the Gnosticism side. There's a huge difference between being or coming to a conclusion, holding a belief or an opinion, and being dogmatic or certain on that. I have plenty. Trust me. I mean, I'm one of the most opinionated people that most people know. So that doesn't mean that as a very devout agnostic, I cannot hold an opinion. It just means that my opinions are not concrete. They can be changed. I think that's one of the, to foray into politics a little bit here, one of the scariest things about how the American public look at campaigns. I hate hearing the term flip-flopper as if it's a negative thing, unless somebody's bouncing back and forth. It's, well, 25 years ago, this person held this opinion, and now it's changed to a degree that it could almost be considered opposite. It's like, well, that means that person probably grew over those 25 years and is understanding the world differently. If it's over the course of 6 months, then we have problems. And if it's going back again, but realistically, that is a good thing. It's not a bad thing that somebody changes their opinions over time. If I still held the opinions I held 20 years ago, I would have the opinions of a second grader. And those probably weren't very reliable. So I think that life experience and age really affect and should affect how we see the world. So to expect somebody to be consistent their entire life is scary.
Yeah, well, flip-flop many times implies that they're back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But it's regarded as if it's almost identical with being a chameleon, which is a person who's actually disingenuous. They're a person who's appearing to take the popular opinion based on, determining which way the wind is blowing. Yeah. Oh, yes. And I like the movie, The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. The way they represented the politician in that, that, ooh, I love to sidestep, I thought that was a very, very funny, simplistic overview of the flip-flopper, as we would, normally, the person is really just disingenuous. And
Well, I
You
think
know,
that used to be the definition, but as of about 8 or 9 years ago, that's when I've seen a big shift. It was the Bush and Kerry election was the one that I first saw it really taking a dramatic, becoming a common media meme that people were using to describe somebody who changed their position from decades ago. And
as if
that's
rigidity was a virtue. You know, I don't get it.
mhm.
But I'll tell you, you know, there's more than one way to be disingenuous. Being a chameleon is only one of them. And I don't, I'm uncomfortable a little bit coming across as honestly jaded, but I'm not really enamored with our current political climate. You know, I, I, I find all of it way too disingenuous. I don't think either party is being as honest about how their view is owned by contributors, how open they are to lobbyists, and this is their responsibility not to be. I don't think that they are as honest about how committed they are to their party line instead of committed to thinking in terms of genuinely considering the the wide, broad considerations that each different point of view offers. It's, you know, because I got to tell you, I am not a conservative. I am not a liberal. I think that anybody who's a liberal or anybody who's a conservative or anybody who's any of those things is being way too shallow and narrow-minded. I think a person needs to recognize that a liberal approach, a conservative approach, say a libertarian approach, each of these is a standpoint that it needs to be thought about and considered. And until you can genuinely appreciate why intelligent people would take a particular view and see value in it, but how all of them do so, I really think you need to be, you know, have a multiplex of notions and realize this is a conundrum. And to me, I wish the politicians were more involved in finding a balance of the variety of axes and viewpoints upon which we look at life. And I don't think our political setup is prepared to do that in the least. And I'll tell you this, if our choices are between two narrow-minded, shallow points of view, as wonderful as some of the insights each one offers, that's just not enough to really answer our human problems, particularly when in some ways it's more of a liberal spin or more of a conservative spin on the person who's paying the paycheck of keeping them elected, you know. So I'm a somewhat jaded citizen at this point in time when I take a look at the politics.
I think that honestly, anybody who's really enamored with the system as we have it now in the United States it has something seriously wrong with them. But that's if anybody looks at it and says, "Yeah, our government's working great," there might be some denial going on to some extent. But you know, I have to tell you that your position, I could not agree more that we need to look and be able to understand why other people would hold these positions, and I do that. I can tell you that everybody who holds positions other than me hold those positions because they're not as awesome as I am, and they don't understand the world properly as I do. So
Yeah,
realistically, it's
but
because they're wrong.
you can't
So
you can't say God bless America.
that's true.
No, I, I'll tell you, I don't think that God wants to curse America, but I don't think He wants to bless America in any sense that the earth is full of the opportunity that each of us have, and you know, but the mixing of I believe in God, but to this mixing of nationalism and God is, in my opinion, dangerous, very dangerous.
That is one of the subjects that we specifically said that we'd like to talk about is nationalism. But I think I'd like to dedicate a whole show to that one before we delve into that. I want to talk. Hey, I mean, go back to the topic I originally was shooting for because this is all related, believe it or not, in enough ways that I think that we can tie it all together nicely with a little bow if we start working at it now. So,
Cool.
I when we talk about the politics and these left-right divisions and what makes a crime, why you and I see the world differently but come to the same conclusions in so many ways. There is an author, a sociologist, well, actually is a professor of ethical leadership um, at or that I would like to get on the show. His name is Jonathan Haidt. It's that I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but Haidt. And he has written a book that I just ordered, and I'm really excited for. It is called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And this is fascinating. There's a series of quizzes as well that are based on some of his research that I believe it's called yourmorals.org. I'm going to look that up yourmorals.org. It's a website you need to register for, but there is the Moral Foundations questionnaire, something that you can take, and it is through a series of several questions. And they have a lot of them, but it breaks things down by um, by categories as to what you base your values on. And I think that you hit the nail right on the head earlier when you talked about values. That the way that that this particular scientist breaks it down, there's I think 6 different scales, and I've been looking to find those because I had them written down, but I seem to have lost that. But things that are sort of like Freudian opposites that, or the or not Freudian, was that Jung, where there's the dichotomous points that it's either one direction or the other that you lean. Things like progress versus tradition, in group versus out group.
Was that Eric Erickson? I don't recall right now, but yeah.
That sounds right. And he he's broken it down in a way that when I first took these quizzes, again, it is your moral or your morals, that is plural.org, org, that it really opened my eyes to helping me to understand how people can see the world so differently than how I see it, and how I can look at a law banning well, again, to use an example from last week, a law banning marijuana when alcohol is legal, to be absolutely mind-bogglingly absurd. Well, other people think it's righteous and perfect, and it's a very, very good idea because the marijuana is harmful and bad, and even alcohol is harmful and bad and should be against the law, because that's according to their values. That's it's a judgment that it's about how they weigh life. I mean, how they weigh the good and the bad
in the
things.
political climate. In the political climate, we have this false notion that, if something is harmful, we need a law. I'm sorry, but only lawmakers think that life is regulated by laws. Now, I think we do need laws. Laws help us in many ways. I think it's awesome that it's arbitrary that we drive on the right side versus the left side. We could learn either skill, but it's helpful to have, a society organized. I think we can have laws that help us to determine how that will work. But also, I think that laws can be helpful, but to think that, if there's a problem, well, what we need is a law, when there's almost a sense in which that's a statement that says, I don't believe human beings can actually think or cooperate, or that our culture, our society can be something in and of itself free, independent, and flowing. And I don't think you have to take even the libertarian view of that, that, we don't want the government messing with us in any way other than what they absolutely must. But without regard to that, the idea that we need a law. I don't drink to excess, even though I could go down and buy as much alcohol as I want to. I don't, and I don't, now, part of the reason I don't use drugs is because they are illegal. But if they were legalized, I personally, I don't have any appeal to that sort of thing. But at the same time, I'm telling you, the law is not for me the primary reason why I don't do those sorts of things. I don't do those sorts of things because I have a life. I'm trying to do things. That's the kind of thing that fits in with my sense of self and what I want to do, where I want to go, what I want to be, what I want to have available. And there's a sense in which I think all these laws, I know this is a little long-winded, sorry, that yeah, why does law have to be the approach to solving these problems?
I think that you, once again, have really hit the nail on the head, is that there's a lot of the litigious world that we live in. Everything needs to be legislated, and everything needs to be handled through the government, to the point where, I mean, I have been in the situation where I was sitting around with my wife, a friend, and my brother in his apartment, and we had the police come to the door to ask us to quiet down at 11:30 at night. We were talking boisterously, but we didn't have music playing. We weren't doing anything. It was a neighbor that could have just knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I'm trying to sleep. Can you guys keep it down a little bit?" But I think that really betrays a reality of why we have this more than anything else, is that that's embarrassing. And there's a certain anonymity to allowing the government to do that for you as well. We have no idea which of his neighbors is the one that called. Pretty sure it was the old guy downstairs, but that's it allows people to remove themselves from it. It's like people who support capital punishment. I really think that I'm a huge fan of the Game of Thrones series. I'm by George R.R. Martin, and there is, I guess it's the Song of Fire and Ice is the name of the actual series, but there's a character in that, Ned Stark, who is a warden of sorts, and in the very beginning of the very first book, he executes somebody that was a deserter and makes it very clear to his children that this is his job, and he will never pass on the job of execution to somebody else, because he's the one who holds the judgment, the ability to judge, and he should be the one who then wields the blade. And I think that as much as I don't necessarily think that desertion deserves death or whatnot, I think that is a very, very fantastic understanding of how things have gone so differently. Is in much of the modern world, it's very, very easy for us to hold an opinion very strongly, to be the judge and the jury, but certainly not the executioner. And I think that that's a major issue. We get to make these decisions and arbitrarily assign them to other people, and then not have to deal with the actual consequences of those situations. And so that really allows a lot of alienation and a lot of power to be accumulated with even realizing what you're doing to other people in that respect. So I did want to say I found the mental modules, as they're called here by that author. They are care versus harm, and these are, again, the things that value, or the things that you value that will really mold the way that you make decisions. So caring for others versus how much something harms something, fairness versus cheating, loyalty and betrayal, authority and subversion, sanctity and degradation, and liberty and oppression. And no single decision is made on any one of those scales, but it's impossible to not consider all of them to some degree in almost every decision that we make. So how you hold your values can change how you're going to make nearly any decision, especially when you're looking at a minimum of 6 different facets that you're weighing it on. And there's nothing to say that that's a comprehensive list even.
Right. And it's a false notion, in my opinion, that a particular value can only be upheld or expressed through a specific condition or a specific behavior. All conditions and all behaviors are a part of an overall balance. And depending on what that overall balance is, a real value can be expressed in a very different behavior. I mean, just recently in the news, a lot of people were very upset about the fact that the diversity that Obama has been preaching is something that, in a sense, he's violating, in that his own cabinet doesn't reflect the diversity he's talking about. Now, I think that we can all agree that we want qualified, capable people. This is a jaded person talking about political appointments. We want qualified, capable people in various different positions. And I don't think that value in itself has anything to do with whether or not the person we choose is male or female. But diversity is also a value. And so there's a sense here in which, are they out of balance? Is anything out of balance? Well, this changes the way we might consider. Not that we want to put an incompetent person in office, but if we have people who, and it's a foolish thing to think, well, let's see, this person scores 97.3 on their ability to do the job, and this one's 97.2. So we're going to go with a 97.3. I'm sorry, the idea, the notion that we can actually, truly, accurately, and precisely evaluate the usefulness of a particular person for a particular job is, I mean, we can make some decisions. We can determine, whether or not they're well suited in various ways. But, there's a sense here in which these different values need to be held in balance. And that can change the decisions we might make in any particular situation based on the balance of everything else outside of that situation.
The other thing that I really recommend people doing, I'm all about online quizzes today, but the other one that I think was really revealing to helping me understand how I view the world and how others do, it's politicalcompass.org. I'm just checking really quick to make sure it's
still there.
It is .org. So it's one that gives you, just on similar to the Gnostic, agnostic, theist, atheist. It gives it to you on a coordinate plane of where you fall, along with where some other politicians might fall if they were to take the quiz, according to projections that the people from the site have used with analysis of policies and statements. But that was a really eye-opening one too, because it really does help you to understand that there's a spectrum, and the questions that are asked, if you pay attention while you're going through it, helps you see how people can, especially when viewed through the lens of different values, how people could make these decisions. For example, on the 6 values that I listed off, or the 6 categories, one of them that is very, very important to me as a progressive, as a very, very left-wing socialist, is fairness. As we talked about last week, that our judicial system is just incredibly unfair against people who are disadvantaged coming into it. Our economic system is as well. And that, it really eats at me. That bothers me a lot. Now, there's also liberty and oppression in there. I have a friend who is very, very, very concerned with liberty and thinks that liberty equals fairness. It's what creates fairness in that respect. And to do any sort of legislation or taxation to redistribute the gains that somebody else has, again, we view the world differently. There's also sanctity versus degradation. I view very, very little as sacred in my understanding of the word. But according to this scale, that's actually one that I rank pretty high on a value that I look at, because I view humanity as sacred. As I really think that when we don't treat people with the respect that they deserve as just humans, we're doing one of the biggest travesties that we're capable of. And realistically, how is that not a level of sanctity? in that respect. So it's really interesting, again, to take these and to then to look at the decisions that you take, or that you understand. I mean, another one, loyalty versus betrayal. I would have guessed that I would not rank loyalty as one of my highest ones. But then when I realized that I would most likely murder for a family member, that means, I have a decent amount of in-group loyalties. So,
I would even have a problem with the loyalty versus betrayal axis itself. I don't feel like that's necessarily the choices. I
well,
think
I think
that
that it's
there
not
is, I
necessarily.
feel loyalty to both sides, and I'm not interested in having to take sides in everything or any, now, like you mentioned, what if my family members are being attacked? My family would have no one to take their side but me, in a sense. And so there's an important role to play there, I suppose. But I mean, that's a tough decision. But I don't see loyalty versus betrayal as being the only options. That there are many ways in which we
Well,
need
I
to,
think that that
you
may
know,
have been my
w-
fault in how I presented that. As it's not really loyalty versus betrayal. It's more
oh,
a positive versus a negative phrasing of the same thing.
oh,
Loyalty being the positive, betrayal being the negative. If you think betrayal is an ultimate bad, then that means you sort of by default think that loyalty is an ultimate good. So that was
oh,
my mistake in how I
yeah.
described that. Same with fairness and cheating. If you think that fairness is very important, then you think that cheating is a very, very bad thing that you can do. So that was my mistake in how I portrayed
Yeah.
that initially.
What you mentioned there, though, it struck a nerve with me, the fairness and the liberty. You know, my experience has been, and people who are very big on liberty might not like this, but my experience has been that people who want certain things to be free are oftentimes people who like the luxury of being in denial about how certain circumstances are in their favor and hold other people over a barrel we're not admitting even exists. And now let's just let it be what it is and let the chips fall where they may, and that's the fair thing. Whereas your concept of many people being treated fairly. I would have to agree with that. Particularly in light of you're sharing this in terms of the redistribution of stuff. I think that there's some people who acquire a great deal because they work very hard, and there's a sense in which I think that they're entitled to the fruit of their labors. There's a lot of people who acquire a great deal to themselves because in ways they don't want to admit there's something really kind of fundamentally unethical going on, where they've discovered how to play the rigged game that others aren't aware of or can't play or don't have the skills or the connection, and then they want to treat this as if it's totally fair. It's everyone can make these choices, and the truth is that there's a lot of things when it comes to the economics of our culture. No, everyone cannot make that choice. Many of these choices are only available to the first come, first served, and then we run out. Um, that's the way that works. And so to hold everybody responsible who didn't make the same choices is playing a game, you know, because not
Well,
all of those choices are they're not all fixed, but it's not as if everybody. I mean, for example, look at health insurance. It's true. There are some people who have quit their jobs and gotten a better job to get health insurance. But what we don't want to be honest about sometimes, I think, is this: that for every 1,000 people who go back to school, get further training, improve themselves so that they can get a better job to get health insurance, for every 1,000 people that do that, for the last several years, there would be 1,200 people who had already done that, already had insurance and lost it. You know, so that although there are some people who are making inroads and making decisions that get them there, there's a lot of people who've already made those decisions, were there, and now they're out.
And very frequently through no
So
fault of
the
their own at all.
system is not one that's going to take care of them all. You cut out
Yeah,
on me.
the other thing that I think when we talk about freedom, there's a lot of talk about freedom. This ties into the gun rights that we've talked about. It ties into the crime and some of these other the oppression ideas that we have and distribution unfairness. I think that freedom is a word that can be looked at, or it's a concept that can be looked at in two very different ways. And I think that that's a fundamental difference between a lot of people who swing far to the left like me and a lot of the people who swing far to the right, is that there's two ways to understand freedom. One is freedom from oppression or freedom from direct intervention, freedom to do as you will in the environment you are in. And that's, I think, what you had mentioned a little bit earlier, is that, if you're already in a situation where you happen to have several advantages and other people just aren't so lucky, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be free to take advantage of the situation. Whereas I see freedom, and again, on my value scale, I believe that this is the correct way to see it, but that comes down to how I weigh the values. As more of a positive notion, that freedom to do something. I think that as long as we have any sort of predictors, your social class, your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, your religion, even the region that you were born in or your geographical location, that can accurately, to any statistically significant level, predict how successful you're going to be in life, then we have a problem. It's only once none of those things matter that we can really say that the achievements that people have or the situations they end up with in life are because of their own ability and their own choices. Otherwise, we're playing a game with reality. It's simply not the case that they ever had the same freedom that other people did.
I don't think we can ever achieve that level of fairness. I can see some value in it, but at the same time, there will be advantages that that cannot be lost. There will be disadvantages that won't be overcome. I think the best we can do is to acknowledge those and recognize them and seek to alleviate the rigidity of it or the walls that we put up to make certain that this doesn't cross over or change. But I mean, today in our society, it's really in many ways, I think, set up so that if you're a person from a very advantageous background, that your children are more likely to also maintain that advantageous background and move forward with it than, say, somebody who doesn't have that advantageous background. But as a way of keeping walls up, at the same time, some of these advantages really do prepare us. An example that I think that I could use is this. There are people who are wealthy. And these people who are wealthy, chances are that it's a higher probability that their children will also end up in positions in life where they too are wealthy. But I got to be honest with you. There are some people who, in their wealth, have actually learned a more proper way of managing money that has become almost second nature to the small subculture of their family, and their children grow up with this knowledge sort of innate. And it doesn't make them better, but it does make their understanding of money something that is more realistic, more of the way that money really works. And as a result, these people are going to have that advantage is not going to go away. And there's going to be people who come from a poor background who don't really understand the acquisition of wealth. They think it's just, having more money and being able to buy the big TV, that they tend to squander it. I mean, you take a look at people who win the lottery. 10 years later, they're in the same position they were in before they won the lottery. And it's because, given the opportunity to have the wealth, they had no clue how to really handle it. And now these are advantages that a person possesses, but they're more than just circumstances that are to their advantage. They are advantages of perspective, of insight, of maturity, wisdom, and this is going to continue on. And there's a sense in which it should. But what we shouldn't do is we shouldn't prohibit the insight and the wisdom from being shared and encouraged and developed in people who aren't in that advantage. It'd be great if we could teach other people how to better handle their money. But at the same time, I also think that there's a lot of evil in people who have learned to handle their money so well that money is really more of what life's all about for them than people. And it's not as if we all have to die rich, or that being a person who is so well off that you're going to, your kids are going to inherit millions. That's not necessarily an advantage. Not only that, but I don't think it's possible to do that without having acquired a great deal of that wealth by having, in legal ways, stolen it from the very people who actually created it. There's this thing recently going on.
That may be where we have to go with next week's show, because we are out of time. Joey is apparently cutting us off a little early. Or my clock is off. I'm not sure which it is, but I
suspect it's Joey doesn't like what we're talking about.
That's probably it. Joey is the one taking advantage of us, and he's coming from a position of power and wealth, and stripping us of our valuable contribution to society. Realistically, I think that you're right, and in that we cannot see. We'll never be able to get absolute fairness, but I think that we are doing humanity a disservice if we are not doing two things at all possible moments. One, recognizing that these advantages and disadvantages exist and are real, and two, doing what we can to try to reduce them.
Yeah, because people are suffering unnecessarily as a result of it. Yeah.
So we may have to pick that up next week. This has been Inspiring Honesty. Thank you for joining us, and again, or tune in again next week at 6 p.m. Central Time for us to carry on this conversation. Stay tuned after this for The Unconventional Pastor with that guy.
And we will be back unless Joey cuts us off.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am shocked. I have never, ever taken advantage of a host time, or anything of the like. But if I wanted to, it's nice to know that I could. We hope that you've
Just
enjoyed.
So you're aware, audience.
Turn him down quickly. Turn him down.
He's
Turn him down.
things.
Number 7. Thank you. You're gone. I'm not listening to you anymore, Greg. We hope you enjoyed Greg. He's done for the day. Tune in just a moment. Bob is going to be back, the unconventional pastor. We will see if his show is as wonderful as it always is. I'm betting on him. Until then, stick around.